inclusive. We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
Your chairperson can issue him what type of ballot? A provisional envelope. Why? Where is it going? Not in the tabulator. It's going in that envelope, right? We have how many days? 6. So what is the Department of Elections going to do with it? Destroy it. Challengers and poll watchers. They have to wear a mask and they have to stay 6 feet. That's important because they can come behind your table. But if you don't have 6 feet, they can't come back there. Any questions?
So the 6 feet back, like they have really good vision, they can actually see.
Exactly. Yes, they got really good vision. Or they brought their binoculars. 6 feet. That's the rule, right? And you are entitled to your 6 feet.
Is that common? I mean, can we expect that?
Yep, there's a coming. They're coming. I don't know if they're coming to every precinct, but they're coming to many of them in the city. Yes, we have already gotten word. The state has already said they're coming. And the basic thing they're going to challenge is what? Absentee ballot. That is correct. Yes.
What if they're like challenging and they start yelling and kind of making a scene?
911. They got standards. They got conduct standards.
Okay.
They make a scene, get them up out of there. Or the police are.
6 feet back, like they have really good vision, they can actually see.
Exactly. Yes, they got really good vision. Or they brought their binoculars. They make a scene, get them up out of there. Or the police are. How do you challenge a ballot? You take the ballot, you write under the barcode 2003, and you cover it with what kind of tape? Post-it. The post-it tape. But this time, you're going to put it in a secrecy sleeve, and Mr. Starks is going to go vote as normal. So his ballot is going through what? The tabulator. Page 15. All right. Page 15 is an example of a new voter registration receipt. In Michigan, what can we do now as new voters? We can register to vote up and through Election Day. The computer system, the electronic poll book program is downloaded on Saturday before Election Day. It is not a live feed. So if someone registers on Sunday or Monday, they're not going to be in your computer. But they should have a receipt when they register. If they do not vote at the time they register, they give them a receipt to bring to the precinct. So Mr. Starks, he came in. You looked and you didn't find him. So you're going to say, Mr. Stark, are you a registered voter in Michigan? Mr. Stark is going to say, sure. I'm Iron Man. I flew in yesterday and I'm registered to vote. Right? Mr. Starks, did they give you a receipt? Hopefully he will have one. He would have either, right up under here. The first type of receipt he might have is going to say process him as a challenged voter. Everybody highlight that. Then below that it says note to election inspector. Highlight that because those are going to be the directions on how you process his ballot. The one down below says process him as a regular voter, a regular ballot. Highlight that. So there are two separate types of receipts. The first receipt is going to tell you to process him as a challenge voter. The second receipt will tell you to process him as a regular voter. They might have either one.
We are just 3 months away from Election Day, and because of the pandemic concerns, there's been a lot of talk about mail-in ballots, also talk about possible voter fraud. Well, a woman in Matthews says that she received a voter registration application in the mail, but it was addressed to her late husband. He died 20 years ago. Our Glenn Counts spoke with her tonight, and Glenn, she told you that she was shocked and skeptical of all this.
Well, Erica, we are at the Board of Elections, and this is one of the places where you can register. Now, when Tim McSwain was alive, he took voting very seriously, and now his widow is wondering if someone tried to take advantage of that. Debbie McSwain was married to her husband, Tim, for 30 years. They had 2 sons.
He was 49 when he passed away in March of 2000. He had liver failure. He had had a liver transplant.
Yesterday, Mrs. McSwain went to the mail and found a surprise.
I got this in the mail yesterday. It is a letter to my husband, who is deceased.
The letter is from the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, and in it are all the materials someone would need to register to vote.
At a moment when voting safely is a concern for so many Americans, it is crucial that you register now. So then I thought, well, this is just a prime opportunity for voter fraud. I could fill it out and sign his name, send it in. He would go back on the books, and then somebody could go vote for him.
We contacted the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee about the mistake. We didn't get a clear reason as to how it happened, but a spokesperson stated that their flyer in the letter says you may only apply if you are eligible to register, and it's irresponsible to suggest that efforts to make sure eligible voters can cast their ballots are fraudulent. We also spoke to Michael Dickerson, head of the Mecklenburg County Board of Elections, and he said a variety of groups mail voter registration forms, not just the Democratic and Republican parties. Mrs. McSwain says her husband was very patriotic and would have been furious at the thought that someone could have fraudulently used his vote.
This is the first time not even advertisements for candidates. I find it hard to believe after 20 years that it was a mistake.
Well, Glenn, we've seen this before. It's not the first time that something like this has happened. How unusual is it, and how does the Board of Elections say you should handle this if it happens to your family?
Well, Erica, you're right. It is definitely not the first time, but they say that a 20-year gap is very unusual. And in terms of how you should handle it, the Board of Elections say situations like this should be reported to them so that they can make sure that no deceased person is on the voter rolls.
Okay, Glenn, thank you. For months, President Trump has been raising concerns about voter fraud when it comes to mail-in ballots. He caused a stir among some lawmakers when he suggested on Twitter last week to delay the election because of it. He also suggested that voting by mail would cause a drawn-out counting process that could delay the results.
This is going to be the greatest election disaster in history. And by the way, you guys like to talk about Russia and China and other places? They'll be able to forge ballots. They'll forge them. They'll do whatever they have to do. People should go and they should vote or do an absentee ballot. So what do you do with the president?
Because of the pandemic, it seems many people are choosing to vote by mail in North Carolina. Just last month, we told you more than 100,000 people have already requested a mail ballot already. Now, that is 5 times as many as were requested at the same point back in 2016. North Carolina is a no-excuse absentee state. That means that any eligible voter can request to vote by mail.
The postal inspector contacted you today in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
What did they say to you?
They asked me the same questions you asked me yesterday about what I'd seen and what I'd heard, and we're asking if I had any more information or whatnot.
You witnessed your supervisor backdating a ballot to November 3rd?
I did not witness them backdating it. I witnessed them talking about backdating.
What did you hear them say?
They were talking about how the day before, which was the 4th, they had postdated all but one of the ballots that were picked up as the 3rd, but they had one that they made a mistake and postmarked it the 4th.
You heard Robert Weisenbacher say this to Daryl, or Daryl say it? How did you hear it?
Robert was saying it to Daryl.
Robert was saying it to Daryl.
Yes.
They made a mistake on the ballot, and they should have backdated the November 4th ballot to November 3rd, correct?
Yes.
And you heard this, and since you did the interview with me in the shadows, what has happened to you at your employment? They were taking an action against you today?
Well, I'm not for sure, but they are bringing up stuff that happened, like in the past.
So they brought up old allegations against you today that were already adjudicated, and they brought those up today?
Yes.
These inspectors have. What was this? What was the nature of your conversation with the post office officials that reached out to you today about this, about our interview?
They said that I was. Well, because of certain factors, I was kind of implicated as the one who had came out. So they wanted to get my side of the story because they wanted to start an investigation into this. I think this comes from above them, and that's what I told the postal inspectors. I just think they were just doing what they're told. And, yeah.
This voting machine is called a WinVote. It was used in American elections between 2004 and 2014. In 2017, it took hackers just a few hours to play Rick Astley on one of these at a cybersecurity conference. Although the WinVote was out of use by then, the stunt pointed to a real problem. American voting machines are old and vulnerable, so why aren't states and counties paying to replace them? In most of the U.S., voting machines are over a decade old. In 2016, voters in these counties were using machines bought in 2008 or even earlier. At that time, this was America's most popular cell phone. Fast forward to 2018, and the greatest threat to these machines probably isn't hacking. They're not even connected to the internet, so remote, large-scale meddling would be almost impossible. The biggest problem is that they're so old, some of them may not be working right. For over a decade, there have been reports of apparent vote flipping, machine errors, and hardware breaking down across the country. But even though this happens every election, very few machines have been replaced. And to understand why so many machines are failing now, you have to look back at the 2000 election between George Bush and Al Gore.
And the lead story at this hour is the state of Florida is too close to call. A nation waits.
Election officials decided to count all of the ballots by hand. Punch hole is called a chad.
Pierced, but still attached.
Hanging chad and whether it's an allowable vote.
What ballots count and what ballots don't count. A hanging chad is the partially torn piece of paper left on a ballot that isn't fully punched out. When the 2000 election went to a recount, Florida officials had to figure out whether hanging chads represented a vote or not.
Clearly punched their ballot correctly, and there's a hanging chad on the back. It may read one time as no vote, and then a second time as a vote.
After the recount, frustrated officials started replacing their old machines with new electronic ones. Typically, state and local officials would pay for this on their own. But after the 2000 election fiasco, the federal government passed the Help America Vote Act, which provided several $1 billion to pay for new equipment.
Congress has made a vital contribution to the democratic process. Now it's my honor to sign into law the Help America Vote Act of 2002.
The electronic machines got rid of hanging chads, but they also introduced new problems. Officials without security training sometimes chose weak passwords. The software requires regular security updates, and some machines don't have paper backups that can be used to audit voting. A recent report on election security says that conducting elections with paper-based voting systems is one of the most important steps states can take to improve election security. The Help America Vote Act was the first time the federal government provided funding for voting equipment. Now that money is running out, and many machines are failing. Without federal funding, some states, like New Mexico and Rhode Island, have provided money for new machines. But in other states, like New Jersey, officials continue to work with aging equipment. And there's a problem with relying on local funding. It can give an unfair advantage to larger counties. In Texas, for example, 2 neighboring counties have different budgets for their voting systems. Travis County is home to about 1 million people. In 2017, their election administration budget was close to $2 million. Next door, rural Blanco County budgeted only $46,000. The problem with this is that state and local officials are expected to pay for new equipment on their own. But that's rarely a priority in the budgets they're given. On the other hand, the federal government has a much larger budget. For now, Congress has approved $380 million to improve the country's election infrastructure. Whether that money will be used to replace all of America's aging voting machines remains to be seen.
We have put together, I think, the most extensive